I'm Caleb with YouCanMakeThisToo. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm making a router table. You guys are smart people and know how internet videos work. Companies approach creators like me and provide us product and/or compensation so we can support our families and make content for you. NewAir is the sponsor of this video, and they provided me with this AC14100E portable air conditioner. It's a 14,000 BTU unit that cools down my shop quick. It has a remote control that I really like because I can cut it off whenever I do any, on-camera scenes where it's a little too loud. And it has an auto mode, so I can set the temperature and it'll go between cooling and fan mode and keep it really cool in here.
Like all of my plywood projects, this one started with breaking sheets down with my circular saw, then a lot of table saw cuts, and some cross cuts at the miter station. I'm laminating the top together, so I work on it first to give the glue plenty of time to dry. I'm laminating 2 sheets of plywood to make creating the router lift hole easier. Normally for a router lift, it takes routing 2 different patterns at 2 different depths. But instead, I'm going to cut the 2 different shapes out of each sheet and then glue them together. I cut the shape out of the router lift plate out of 1/2-inch plywood. And then I screw it to a 3/4-inch sheet before I transfer the hole and then start laying out what material needs to be removed so the router will sit through the hole. Not surprisingly, I didn't nail the fit the first time, so I tried to fit the router lift and then just made a few more adjustments until it was good. If you're enjoying this, please hit that like button and leave me a comment. These videos take me a while to produce, so if you want to see what I'm working on regularly, consider following me over on Instagram. I post there daily.
I must help you for the thing. I'll help. I am just really strong.
You're really strong?
Yes.
Okay. Can you help me with this?
And this is why I screwed them together before I started sketching on the second sheet. Those screw holes act as registration points to make sure everything lines up exactly the same way it did when I started laying out for the router lift. Those screws went where the miter track dado will go, so the holes aren't going to be a problem later. A few more screws go through the underside to clamp it all together, and then I set it aside to dry. After it dries, I trim up the edges at the table saw and then start edge banding the top with walnut. I did this with my assembly table when I made it, and I really like the look of the walnut edge banding, so I think that's going to turn into my theme for shop furniture. If you're interested in plans for this build, I have them available on pre-order on my website. There's a link in the description, and they're currently 25% off. I anticipate having them released by the end of next month, September 2018, and then they'll be full price. A little wood putty filled in some of the gaps and tear out before I moved on to cutting the grooves for the tracks. First, I cut a wide groove that'll hold the combination miter and T-track for jigs and feather boards. Then I cut some smaller grooves for T-tracks perpendicular to the first track for the fence to ride in. Those grooves will stop at the first groove. So I marked the edge of the first groove and where the blade stops cutting. That way I could stop cutting when those lines meet and not accidentally cut too far. But once I started cutting, I completely forgot about that and cut too far anyway. Fortunately, the incident had me paying more attention for the other side and lets me show you how to do a repair. The repair job was pretty straightforward. I just used a chisel to finish cutting out a rectangle as deep as the first sheet of plywood. Then I used an offcut from that type of plywood to make a patch and CA glued it in. Time to start working on the cabinet. I drill pocket holes in all the pieces, then cut a big slot out of the back piece to accommodate the dust collection hookups. Screwing the cabinet together went really quick, but I did run into a slight issue. The front just has 2 stretchers running across it, but I'd cut them about 3/16 of an inch too short. Fortunately, I had some scrap pieces that were just the right thickness, so I cut them to size and glued them on the ends, then screwed it all back together. For shop projects, I like to keep the drawers simple. These are entirely made from 1/2-inch plywood, wood glue, and brad nails. I just add glue and brad the sides together before gluing the bottom on and use the bottom to square up the sides. I made 2 deep drawers that could store routers, router bases, and jigs, and then 2 pretty shallow drawers to keep in little accessory things like Allen keys, wrenches, bits, flat jigs, and stuff like that. I normally use ball bearing slides, but I decided to try wood runners on this project. I cut down some 3/4 inch plywood and used spacers to glue them in place in the cabinet. Then added the runners to the drawers, again using spacers to get them at the proper height on the drawers. With the bottom drawers done, I took everything out of the cabinet and then attached the top, again with lots of pocket screws. Then I began adding the tracks to the top and installing the router lift. I used the router lift itself as a guide to perfectly align the holes to tap in some T-nuts that'll let me bolt the lift to the top. I also added leveling screws to each corner of the lift. I can use these to perfectly flush up the router lift to the top. Then it was on to taping off the hardware and starting to apply finish to the top and cabinet.
I'm at a bit of a tricky spot, so I'm going to take a few minutes and think about how I want to proceed. The router lift goes here, and I'm going to have a dust collection box that covers it, and then I need a divider on either side of those, and then I'm going to do some drawers for storage. So I have to figure out the order of putting on the drawer slides, the dividers, and the dust collection box to make sure I don't get in my own way.
While I pondered the next bit, I went ahead and put the router in the lift and installed the adjustable feet and casters to the cabinet. I ended up installing the dust bucket first because I realized that the dividers would have to be installed over the mounting flange for the dust bucket. I marked the flange location on the dividers before drilling the pocket holes, so that way I wouldn't be screwing through the metal. These drawers won't hold much weight, so I just used 1/2-inch plywood runners with CA glue and a square to keep them level while I installed them. The 2 smaller drawers have bit holders from Rockler, and the other side is just a narrow but deep drawer I might put my trim routers in, or maybe some table saw stuff, as this will live beside the table saw. I cut all the drawer fronts out of a single piece of 1/2-inch plywood so they'd all have the same color and kind of similar grain. I used some CA glue and activator to hold them in place, and then ran some screws from the inside to attach them permanently. I wanted the cover for the dust bucket to be easily removable, so I drilled pockets for some small magnets and then epoxied them in place. Next was adding the magnetic switch. I just screwed it to the cover and drilled a hole for the cables and fed them around to the back. The only thing left at this point was to add some handles. I made these simple pulls on the router table. CA glue held them in place, and then I added screws from the inside. If you want to see how I made the pulls, along with a lot of other things that you can do with the router table, then make sure to subscribe. My next video will be going over a lot of cool stuff that router tables make easier and some of the jigs that Rockler sent me to use with this.
All right, everything's together, but I'm having a little bit of a problem. So, in the low range, when the router's really low, it raises without a problem. But you'll see once I start getting to the top, there we go, it binds and it really doesn't want to come up. Now if I go to the fine gear, because I have a lot more leverage against it, it moves, but it's still not near as smooth as I think it should be. I talked to my buddy Chris over at Third Coast Craftsman, who has the same router lift, and he said he had the same problem and talked to Rockler about it, and the deal is I just mounted the router too tight, so let me fix that. All right, so I opened the router table up, and now I just need to loosen the lift around the router. And I'm using a little trick here. Got my camera with the phone front facing. So I can see what I'm doing. I ended up loosening about 3/4 of a turn, and now it moves a lot smoother. And I can get it up plenty to change the bit without a problem now. Thank you for following along, and I'd also like to say thank you to Rockler for providing all of the hardware for this build, and of course NewAir for sponsoring it and keeping my shop cool. Please support the companies who support the community, because without them, we wouldn't be able to make this content.